Rebecca, published in 1938, is Daphne du Maurier's most famous novel, a Gothic masterpiece filled with mystery, romance, and psychological tension. At its heart, Rebecca explores the theme of identity, particularly the influence of the past and its inescapable presence in the present. The novel's nameless protagonist and narrator is haunted by her predecessor, Rebecca, the first wife of Maxim de Winter, who, despite her death, casts a long shadow over the living. The novel is set in the grand estate of Manderley, which becomes a character in itself. With its sprawling gardens, hidden secrets, and imposing structure, Manderley serves as both a sanctuary and a prison, symbolizing the past's hold over the present. The central mystery revolves around Rebecca's death and her lingering influence over Maxim and the people around him. Through the eyes of the insecure narrator, du Maurier weaves a tale of jealousy, deception, love, and betrayal. Plot summary: the narrator's introduction and courtship. The novel opens with the famous line, "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again," introducing the readers to the dreamlike and haunting tone of the story. The unnamed narrator recalls her experiences at Manderley, setting the stage for the tale to unfold. The narrator, a shy and inexperienced young woman, is working as a companion to Mrs. Van Hopper, a snobbish and domineering American woman, when she meets Maxim de Winter, a wealthy and mysterious widower. Maxim is staying at the same hotel in Monte Carlo, where Mrs. Van Hopper and the narrator are vacationing. Though Maxim is much older and initially distant, the narrator and Maxim strike up a relationship. After a brief courtship, Maxim proposes marriage, and the narrator, overwhelmed by his attention, accepts. She leaves her life of servitude behind and becomes Mrs. de Winter, the second mistress of Manderley. Arrival at Manderley. After their honeymoon, the narrator arrives at Manderley, Maxim's ancestral home, which is described as vast, beautiful, and suffused with memories of the past. From the moment she steps into the estate, the narrator feels the overwhelming presence of Rebecca, the first Mrs. de Winter, whose beauty, charm, and sophistication are constantly spoken of by the household staff and the local society. The narrator is especially intimidated by Mrs. Danvers, the sinister and fanatically loyal housekeeper, who idolizes Rebecca and subtly undermines the new Mrs. de Winter at every turn. The narrator struggles to fit into her new role as mistress of Manderley, feeling inadequate compared to the seemingly perfect Rebecca. Every room in the house, every piece of furniture, and every flower arrangement seems to bear Rebecca's mark, reinforcing the narrator's insecurity. She is painfully aware that she is living in Rebecca's shadow, and her marriage to Maxim begins to feel strained, as Maxim grows more distant and brooding. The influence of Rebecca, as the narrator navigates her new life at Manderley, she becomes increasingly obsessed with Rebecca. She learns from various characters that Rebecca was a beautiful, vibrant woman who was adored by everyone who met her. The house is filled with reminders of her presence, from her monogrammed stationery to her carefully curated rooms, which Mrs. Danvers maintains as though Rebecca was still alive. Mrs. Danvers, in particular, seems determined to make the narrator feel inferior to Rebecca. She subtly manipulates the narrator into believing that she will never live up to Rebecca's legacy, often comparing her unfavorably to her predecessor. In one of the novel's most chilling scenes, Mrs. Danvers shows the narrator Rebecca's bedroom, which has been preserved exactly as it was before her death. Mrs. Danvers encourages the narrator to wear one of Rebecca's dresses for an upcoming costume ball, further entrenching the narrator's feelings of inadequacy. The costume ball and revelation of Rebecca's true nature, the turning point in the novel, occurs during the costume ball, a grand event that Rebecca used to host every year at Manderley. The narrator, hoping to impress Maxim and the guests, wears a dress suggested by Mrs. Danvers, only to discover that it is the same costume Rebecca wore at her last ball. Maxim is furious, and the narrator is devastated, believing that she has made a terrible mistake. She feels humiliated, as though she can never escape Rebecca's shadow. However, the narrator's perception of Rebecca begins to shift when new revelations about her character emerge. Despite the widespread adoration of Rebecca, it becomes clear that she was not the perfect woman everyone believed her to be. In fact, Rebecca was manipulative, cruel, and unfaithful, leading a secret double life that was hidden from public view. Maxim reveals that he did not love Rebecca and that their marriage was a fade. He admits that he hated Rebecca and that her death was no accident. He had killed her in a fit of rage when she taunted him about her infidelities and hinted at her plans to have a child that wasn't his. Maxim's confession shocks the narrator, but it also strengthens their bond. For the first time, the narrator realizes that Maxim's brooding and distant behavior stemmed not from lingering love for Rebecca, but from his guilt and fear of discovery. With this new understanding, the narrator sheds her insecurity and takes on a more active role as Maxim's partner, standing by him as they face the consequences of his actions. The investigation and the discovery of Rebecca's boat. The story reaches its climax when Rebecca's sunken boat is discovered, and with it, her body. An inquest is held, and the initial assumption is that Rebecca's death was accidental. However, further investigation reveals inconsistencies that suggest foul play, putting Maxim at risk of being exposed as her killer. Throughout the investigation, Mrs. Danvers continues to exert her influence, insisting that Rebecca was a strong and capable woman who would never have accidentally drowned. As the investigation progresses, it is revealed that Rebecca had secretly visited a doctor on the day of her death. The final twist comes when it is discovered that Rebecca had been diagnosed with terminal cancer and was likely dying. Maxim realizes that Rebecca had deliberately provoked him into killing her, knowing that it would ruin him, but she had already been facing death on her own terms. The destruction of Manderley, the novel's denouement, is both tragic and cathartic. Although Maxim is cleared of suspicion, he and the narrator return to Manderley, only to find it engulfed in flames. Mrs. Danvers, in a final act of revenge, has set fire to the estate, ensuring that neither Rebecca nor the De Winters will ever truly possess Manderley again. The destruction of Manderley symbolizes the final severing of the hold that Rebecca had over the narrator and Maxim. With the past quite literally burned to the ground, the couple is free to start anew, though their future is left uncertain. The novel ends as it began, with the narrator reflecting on Manderley from a distance, now a ruin that exists only in her memories and dreams. Character analysis. The narrator, second Mrs. De Winter, the narrator, whose name is never revealed, is the novel's central character and the lens through which the story is told. Her lack of a name reflects her uncertainty about her own identity, particularly in relation to Rebecca. Throughout much of the novel, she is characterized by her insecurity, naivety, and feelings of inadequacy, especially in comparison to Rebecca, who seems to embody everything she is not: beauty, confidence, and sophistication. However, the narrator undergoes significant growth over the course of the novel. As she learns the truth about Rebecca and Maxim's marriage, she begins to assert herself and move beyond her insecurities. By the end of the novel, she has emerged as a stronger, more self-assured woman, no longer defined by Rebecca's shadow. Maxim de Winter. Maxim is a complex character, torn between his guilt over Rebecca's death and his desire to protect his new wife. He initially appears distant and brooding, weighed down by the past. His love for the narrator is genuine, but it is overshadowed by his unresolved feelings about Rebecca. Maxim's revelation that he killed Rebecca is a turning point in the novel, as it forces the narrator to confront the darker realities of her marriage and of Maxim's character. Despite his flaws, Maxim's confession and vulnerability allow the narrator to see him more clearly, and their relationship deepens as a result. He is no longer the perfect, enigmatic figure she once idealized, but a flawed and human man who carries the burden of his past. Rebecca de Winter, Rebecca, though dead, is the novel's most powerful presence. She is portrayed as a larger-than-life figure whose beauty, charm, and intelligence captivated everyone around her. However, as the novel progresses, it becomes clear that Rebecca was a deeply manipulative and morally corrupt individual. Her seemingly perfect exterior concealed a dark and twisted personality, capable of cruelty and deceit. Rebecca's influence over Manderley and its inhabitants extends beyond the grave, as her memory shapes the actions and emotions of those she left behind. The novel's central conflict revolves around the narrator's struggle to overcome Rebecca's shadow and establish her own identity as the second Mrs. de Winter. Mrs. Danvers is the novel's primary antagonist, a cold and calculating woman who is fiercely loyal to Rebecca. She despises the new Mrs. de Winter and does everything in her power to undermine her. Mrs. Danvers' obsession with Rebecca drives much of the novel's tension, as she constantly reminds the narrator of her inadequacy and keeps Rebecca's memory alive. In the end, Mrs. Danvers' loyalty to Rebecca leads her to destroy Manderley, ensuring that Rebecca's legacy cannot be erased. Her character represents the destructive power of obsession and the inability to let go of the past. Conclusion: Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca is a haunting and atmospheric novel that explores the themes of identity, jealousy, and the inescapable influence of the past. Through its Gothic setting and complex characters, the novel delves into the psychological struggles of its nameless narrator, who must confront the legacy of Rebecca, her predecessor, in order to find her own place in Manderley and in her marriage. The novel's enduring appeal lies in its rich narrative and exploration of timeless human emotions, insecurity, desire, and the fear of being overshadowed. Ultimately, Rebecca is a story about overcoming the ghosts of the past and forging a new identity, free from the weight of comparison and expectation. Created for Squeeze That Book channel. Please subscribe to follow new videos and leave a comment with your thoughts about the book.